Hey y'all, it's Dr. Wright. For this first unit, we're really going to be just getting into what is child psychology. So child psychology is actually part of the parent company of developmental psychology. Developmental psychology studies change throughout the lifespan, so all the way from conception until death. And so child psychology is really just going to be this like small bit of it, right? And we also offer adolescent psychology, which is going to look at a smaller bit that comes after child psychology. And then later on in at your four-year university, you might be able to take psychology related to the elderly or lots of other options that relate to specific demographics. So in this class, like I said, we're really just focusing on children. So we're going to be talking all the way from conception or even before conception, because we'll see that there's certain things about mom and about dad or about the egg and sperm that create this child that can actually influence them further down the line, even before obviously the zygote is created and all that fun stuff, right? So we're going to be looking at from conception, preconception, all the way until about 12 years of age, which is usually where we start thinking about children as pre-adolescents. So first thing we want to do, though, is to figure out what do people who focus on child psychology study. Obviously, they study change throughout the lifespan. They study change in terms of physiological or physical changes. So how does the brain change? How does the body change? How do the muscles change? They study cognitive changes. So how does the thinking ability change throughout the lifespan? And as a person who has worked with kids for a really long time, but also has, I have two of my own sons and then I have a stepson. I've gotten to watch these people go from, can't even hold their own head up because they don't have the muscle capacity in their neck to do this, all the way to my, 13-year-old who's currently yelling at the Xbox about some video game, not in like a bad way, but like, like, oh, I shot you, dude. That sort of way. So these people go through, and I call my children that all the time, by the way, the people, capital T, capital P, the people. So these people go through these physical changes of not being able to move by themselves all the way to being able to walking, to running. I've got friends who I've watched their kids go from not being able to walk, obviously, at the beginning to running cross country and diving and all this really cool stuff, right? And if you think about it, a lot of times it feels like that's quote unquote normal. So why would it be really cool? And we have to keep in mind that there are some kids that never get the opportunities to do these things. There's some folks who want to be parents who never get the opportunity to see their own biological children do these things. We do know that a large number of potential pregnancies end in miscarriage. So if you think about it, the fact that we're all here, the fact that our children are here or that the kids that live next door to us are here is actually a pretty amazing feat of biology. All right. So we will talk about physical development. So muscles, bones, there's actually two different types of physical development we'll talk about. We'll talk about large muscles and small muscles. We will talk about, so gross motor is the large muscles, fine motor is the small muscles, sort of like your fingers and stuff like that. We will talk about cognitive development, so how memory changes, how thinking changes, how a child's understanding of the world changes. So, I remember hearing my kids trying to understand using the past tense and not being able to correctly, like they would say something like, I go to, daycare. And it's like, well, you went to daycare. Yeah, I go to daycare. And it's like, sure. Okay. So there are cognitive times that we develop more cognitively than we do at other times. And then we'll talk about social emotional development. So these kids developing social skills, these kids developing their own personalities, their own demonstrating their temperament, which is kind of what I think of as like baby personality. So for example, an easy baby, that's the kind of temperament. They don't cry a lot, things like that. And they're pretty open to change, whereas, difficult babies maybe cry a lot. Maybe, you get to the point as a parent or a teacher or a daycare provider where you're like, oh my God, this kid, I can't. So that would probably be a difficult child, right? And temperament can actually translate into personality as an adult. So you may know some adults where you're like, oh my God, I can't with this person, right? So those are the types of things we're going to be looking at in this first week. We're also going to talk about some controversies within child development. So, for example, nature and nurture. A lot of people talk about it as verses. So, nature and nurture are not duking it out. Okay, there's no verses. We know now that in every thing that we see, every behavior, every development is influenced both by genetics, so nature, and our environment, and how we're treated, what we learn, things like that. So nurture. Okay, so it's not verses anymore. Get rid of the verses. We're talking about nature and nurture. But what we know is that some things are more influenced by genetics and less influenced by environment, whereas there's some things that are more influenced by environment and less influenced by genetics. But everything is going to be influenced by both at some point. Okay, so this week is light on our reading. I will tell you that this class does have a lot of reading. We are going to be learning about basically 12 years of life, plus taking 3 exams in, 16 weeks. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We got some stuff to do. But if we keep in mind how interesting and how exciting and how cool it can be to watch children learn these skills and to develop as a human, I don't think it feels so much like, oh my God, all this work, but instead it feels like, what else can I discover about how people in general, but how do these people, these small people, develop and learn and think, and it's going to be a really cool semester. So I'm really looking forward to it.